Are you considering a trip to the Smoky Mountains in winter or early spring? Well, today I'm going to talk about what you can expect and how to make the best possible plans for such a trip. Welcome to Bear Facts, where we explore the Smoky Mountains one bear fact at a time. About a year ago, I published my first video on the Smoky Mountains. Boy, was that a hard video to create. It was my first time using the program to publish videos, and the learning curve was high. Looking back, I have so many things I would have done differently, but now I'm here a year later with 56 videos in the bag and so much more to learn and talk about. To celebrate a year of video creations and mistakes, I decided to revisit winter in the Smoky Mountains, look at some new footage and maybe a few old ones, and talk about why people love visiting the Smoky Mountains in the winter and early spring. So why did I start with winter in my videos? Well, let me give you a little history first. In the late fall of 2021, we purchased a tiny slice of the mountains. It was nothing more than a shed that someone had put in electric and a little insulation. There was no bathroom, showers, or even real heat. Our first winter, we didn't even stay more than a few times in the shed. The fact that the toilet was a bucket in the corner was also something that made visiting our shed a unique experience, to say the least. And to top it off, the bed was made from 2x4 structures with a thin mattress on top, so our winter visits were very short. The next year, we purchased a 2010 camper so we can have flushing water and take a shower. Let's just say that the camper came with its own layer of problems, and winters just didn't happen very often. What we never anticipated were the issues we would have in winter. Yes, we knew that it got cold in the Smokies, but it seemed that we couldn't ever really enjoy winters. And that second winter was the worst winter, with high levels of snow and colder temps than normal. That was the winter we got the footage of the frozen river in Elkmont. I guess we learned real quick that the Smoky Mountains can be a challenge to enjoy in the winter, especially after an emergency weekend trip to rescue a frozen well pump. It seemed that we had more negative experiences than positive in winter, so I was determined to make a video that looked at the pros and cons of the Smoky Mountains in the winter. And in that first video, I talked about the pros and cons of visiting in the winter, but what I really didn't do was talk about the duality of the mountains and how your experience can be vastly different from just Gatlinburg, Pigeon Forge to Cherokee and Townsend. The mountains can be treacherous and quite dangerous when people are not aware of what winter can bring. So in this video, let's look at what you can expect or not to expect when visiting the Smoky Mountains in the winter. Okay, so the first thing I'd like to point out is that the winter begins December 21st. It isn't the time frame I'm focusing on for this video. Let's just say that if you decide to visit the mountains anytime between Thanksgiving and the first week of January, all bets are off when it comes to any predictability or planning. The crowds can be massive, prices can go high, and most businesses are open full-time still. And the weather can be just as unpredictable. Let's just say that those weeks are by far the most amazing and worst times to visit the Smoky Mountains. And not something I'm going to talk about with this video today. Nope, I'm going to talk about that strange time between the second week in January and March. This time is usually the quietest time to visit the Smoky Mountains. Let's start with the actual weather. Keep in mind the Smokies are technically in the south, but because you're looking at drastic elevation changes when traveling through the mountains, you will experience a wide range of weather patterns. This past February, Gatlinburg saw temperatures that ranged from 70 degrees to 20 in the span of days. They had some massive flooding in January in Gatlinburg, water levels that actually reached the streets of Anakeesta, and there is no doubt that the Smoky Mountains are the cause for much of the weather patterns you see. Anytime you see a big hike in temperatures, the mountains pour water like an open fire hydrant as the snows melt. Winters are extremely unpredictable. So if you're planning a visit in the winter, make sure you have a plan A, B, and C, especially if you are hoping to actually go into the mountains for a hike or just to drive around. For those of you who want to experience the Smoky Mountain National Park in winter, there are many wonderful advantages and things you will really enjoy about a winter vacation. One of the best parts of visiting the Smokies in the winter is that the views are better in some cases than in summer or fall. Most people like to drive into the mountains and just take in the sights from their car. There are a few places I suggest trying to see if you're planning a winter trip. But keep in mind that many of these roads are closed often due to weather. Always look at the NPS website for road closures when making any plans to visit the parks in the park. One place I would suggest trying to see during the winter is the Foothills Parkway. The foothills are an extension of the Smoky Mountains that allow guests to drive along the top ridges of the mountains. The main section of the foothills begins on Route 129 and runs 33 miles until you reach 321 in Wears Valley. Most people will pick them up in Townsend and do one stretch or the other. There is another short extension in Cosby, Tennessee, but they aren't connected. During the summer and fall, the foliage is pretty dense and there aren't as many breaks along the road to see the hills from. But in winter, you have better views as you drive. There is also less traffic. The foothills are notorious for getting closed in the winter, so if you luck out on a day they're open, take it. Another drive to consider is Route 441 from Gatlinburg to Cherokee. This drive has many spectacular views and trails that people love to try. The two major trails that you can access from this road are Chimney Tops and Alum Caves. You can also get to LeConte from Alum Caves if you're up to a grueling yet very rewarding hike. Ice cleats will be a lifesaver for you if you attempt any of these hikes in the winter. It was on a hike to LeConte that I fell and tore my rotator cuff on ice. The Ben Morton Overlook is a good place to stop and look out at the mountains as well as Newfound Gap. Both of these stops are just before you reach Klingman's Dome, or at least the road that takes you there. Klingman's Dome is off of 441. But the road leading to the top of the mountain is closed to vehicles after December and won't open again until spring. So the only way to enjoy Klingman's in the winter is to hike the 7 miles to the top of Klingman's Dome. There are many people who are willing to take on the challenge and are willing to attempt the trip. Sorry, it's too cold for me. Now, even though you can't drive to the top of Klingman's, you can still keep driving down 441 and see more things in the winter. As you get closer to Cherokee, you have a chance to stop and see Mingus Mills. The mills was built to serve the local community by grinding corn and wheat into flour and cornmeal in the 1800s. However, with technological advances, the mill was eventually shut down. It was preserved and made part of the Smoky Mountain National Park. What makes Mingus a great place to stop in the winter is that it's close to the parking area and road. So even if it's a chilly day, you won't have a long walk. It's a wonderful piece of American history and a true marvel of engineering and construction. There is also the Akonalufti Visitor Center in Cherokee. This visitor center is open year-round and has buildings that you can explore as well as trails that take you up and around the river. The most exciting thing that many people enjoy seeing are the elk. The elk don't care if it's winter or summer. They can be found grazing in the fields year-round. Just keep in mind they're wild animals. That means it's a hit or miss if you catch them out and about. Best time to see them will be around dusk, but they have been seen any time of the day. Even if you miss the elk, you can always walk around the visitor center, and the restrooms are operational year-round as well. Another popular attraction you might enjoy more in the winter is Cades Cove. During the summer, Cades Cove is very, very popular campsite and tourist destination. If you aren't familiar with Cades Cove, it's an 11-mile loop road that gives you scenic tours of the lower elevations of the Smoky Mountains, as well as a chance to see historic buildings and wildlife. And though you most likely won't see any bear in the winter, you might see deer and other wildlife along the way. What makes winter a better time to visit is the amount of visitors is a lot lower. During the fall, it's not unheard of to take 2 hours or more to drive the 11 miles. In the winter, you can easily make it in half an hour if you're just driving through. It's a much more pleasant trip without the massive traffic jams. And since you're in the car, who cares how cold it is? There are many other wonderful things to try and see when heading into the mountains to enjoy the winter views. If you're fortunate and there's a little snow on the tops, but the roads are clear, it's an amazing trip. If you enjoy hiking, there are many days where the temperature is perfect for that hike, but always be aware that the higher you go, more likely that ice will be an issue, and the wind chill will become an issue if you aren't dressed in layers. There's always a chance that the park will close down trails or roads to trails at any time, so keep an eye on the National Park Service website for those closures. Now, I have already talked about how amazing the mountains can be in the winter. Let's address the not so great things about the Smokies in the winter and early spring. The first thing I will point out is that 80% of the bathrooms and facilities are closed most of the winter until late spring. There are a few places like Sugarman's Visitor Center by Gatlinburg or the Oconaluftee Visitor Center in Cherokee that remain open year-round. Some of the trailhead bathrooms and a few of the bathrooms in the bigger campsites might remain open as well. But there are far and few between, and though a closed bathroom is its own emergency at times, there are other more concerning things to consider if you plan to visit the mountains in the winter. I have already pointed out the mountains can be extremely unpredictable and dangerous. If you aren't aware of the dangers, and I'm not talking about the bears, but rather the other motorists. To try and explain how unpredictable a drive into the Smoky Mountains can be, let me give you an example of our last trip. This last winter, we went to visit the Smokies in February. When we left Gatlinburg at 10 a.m., the temperature was about 50 degrees, there was a decent amount of traffic, and the roads were all open and dry and clear. It was a wonderful day to visit. We had heard that there was a little snow that morning in the upper elevations, so we decided to try and get some shots of the mountains if there was any snow. Since the road was still open, we figured that the road conditions were going to be favorable. There wasn't a drop of snow in Gatlinburg, but within a few miles past the park gates, we could see a little white on the roads, which made for some great photography. But the higher we went, not only did the temperatures change, but the conditions of the roads as well. By the time we reached Newfound Gap, the temperatures had dropped almost 30 degrees, and our car thermometer was reading 22 outside, a vast difference from 50 degrees and dry roads in Gatlinburg. But the thing was that the roads had become absolutely treacherous, with a solid sheet of ice covering the roads. Now, keep in mind, we're from the north and are very familiar with these kinds of driving conditions, but there's a big difference between driving roads in the south versus roads in the north. One being that there are very few guardrails in the Smokies. In an attempt to preserve the park and maintain the natural aspects of it, the Park Services did not put in many guardrails at all, especially metal ones. There are a few low stone walls, but nothing that could handle a full-on impact. So, if you manage to slide off the road, one of two things are going to happen. You'll end up in the river or off a ravine. Both have happened to many motorists over the years in the Great Smoky Mountain National Park. And there is another major problem. They don't use salt in the mountains. For obvious reasons, salt is very dangerous to the ecosystem and toxic to the fish and other wildlife. So it makes sense you won't see it. What they will do is put down cinder, which is basically crushed rocks. Cinder can be very dangerous to your windshield and paint, but if not applied quickly and often, it doesn't help the road conditions either, which many motorists who are not familiar with these kinds of roads might not be aware of. Pennsylvania, which is where we hail from, uses cinder on their back roads, so we know how bad the roads were and slowed down. And when you have heavy traffic, snow squalls, and a sudden drop in temperature, you create a sheet of ice. And it took a concerning amount of time for other motorists to realize it. And once they did, the traffic became horrible. Overly cautious motorists just stopped in the middle of the road, and suddenly there was a potential for major accidents as people were being forced to stop on ice. Not a great situation to be in for sure. We were horrified at how irresponsible some drivers were, as one vehicle tried to pass everyone who had stopped for traffic in front of them. These impatient people almost ran into a plow truck on the other side of the road that was laying cinder. People were basically stranded until they can get the cinder plow truck through. And this is the point that the park had actually closed the road. The irony is that by the time we got past Chimney Tops, the roads were dry and clear again. But the park needed to shut down all of 441 until the roads could be cleared. This is actually pretty common in the Smoky Mountains in winter and early spring. One minute the roads are clear and dry and easy to travel, the next minute they are packed with ice. And it's the ice that's the real problem. Snow is easy to get through, but with the volume of traffic, it gets packed down, slippery, and becomes a real challenge to navigate. I got some of the best footage I've ever gotten on that trip, but I'm not going to lie. The other motorists scared me. I wasn't afraid of driving off a cliff myself. I was terrified of other reckless motorists who would crash into me, making us fall off the cliff. And this is the reason I always suggest an alternative plan when visiting the Smokies in the winter. Any time or day, the mountain roads can be closed to vehicle traffic, and this is where your planning can help keep your vacation from getting ruined. Now, if plans get changed due to closed mountain roads, there are plenty of things to consider doing if you're in Pigeon Forge or Gatlinburg. Gatlinburg and Pigeon Forge have many inside and outside activities you can enjoy year-round. But if you're in the mountains for the winter, you're most likely hoping to actually see snow. There are a few places that can meet those expectations. One place where you can get your snow on is Uber Gatlinburg. Now, if you don't know what Uber is, let me explain it in a few words. Uber Gatlinburg is an attraction in Gatlinburg that guests can either drive to or use a cable car to get to the top of their mountainside attraction. Their attraction offers a wide variety of activities and things people can do. There is a full complex building at the top of the mountain. Inside their building is a full ice rink where guests can rent shoes and try their ankles on the ice. During the winter, you can snow tube, board, or just play in the snow. They have a handy conveyor belt for guests to use instead of walking all the way to the top of their tubing hills, as well as ski lifts for people who actually want to ski. At this time, Uber is the biggest ski resort in Tennessee and the only one in the Smoky Mountains. Uber is a pretty big complex. There are places to eat and hang out while the kids are enjoying the snow, rental shops for equipment, and a variety of activities that people can enjoy. I do want to warn you that weekends can get rather busy. Last time we were there, they advertised a 2-hour wait for guests to get on the cable car to the top. I would highly suggest buying tickets online beforehand and getting there early. And don't think you're going to avoid a line by driving to the top. The line of traffic was just as bad for guests trying to get into the parking area. Uber Gatlinburg is open year-round, but their ski slopes do close for the winter. Guests can still use the ice rink, mountain coaster, and ski lifts in the summer months. The attraction opens other activities and things to do for guests in the warmer months, making it a good place to go any time of the year. Another place you can try and have a little fun is in Pigeon Forge Snow. Though this place isn't as big or vast as Uber, their entire complex is indoors, making it a year-round, any time of the year place to enjoy. Personally, I think summer is the best time to go since you can get out of the heat, but the place is very popular in the winter. Parents can sit up in the balcony, sitting in the heated interior as their children snow tube. There is also an indoor snow room for kids to play and make snow people. Many of the mountain coasters do get shut down in the winter, but you will see the golf courses try and stay open. Obviously, Dollywood is closed until March, and many attractions such as Anakista are not open most of the week. As you get closer to spring, things do start to change and the attractions begin to reopen. But keep in mind that winter will hold on to the mountains well into late spring and can still cause the mountain roads to get closed. I would suggest, if planning a winter or late spring visit, to come prepared. Wear layers, make sure you have good tires if possible, and take an all-wheel terrain vehicle if visiting the mountains. Also, make sure you have alternative plans. You may have decided to try and see Newfound Gap and discovered that path was closed. But you could still go down Little River Gorge to get to Elkmont and visit Daisytown or even Cades Cove. If you plan ahead, a winter trip can be extremely rewarding and an amazing experience. I hope that this video helps you plan your visit to the Smoky Mountains. Please note that we at Bearfax do not get paid for our videos. You are getting an honest review from our personal experiences, but facts and things change, so please let us know if you learned anything new and want to share your experiences in the comments. Thanks again for visiting us at Bearfax of the Smoky Mountains. Please click that like button and subscribe to our channel.